What if we could fundamentally rewrite the rules of medicine, moving beyond treating symptoms to correcting the very genetic code that drives disease? Today, we're sitting down with Brad Thompson, a visionary leader from Wyvern Pharmaceuticals, who is at the forefront of a gene therapy revolution. Brad is tackling the immense challenge of bringing transformative gene correction to market, leveraging decades of experience in biopharmaceuticals and a strategic eye on how future technologies like AI will accelerate this new healthcare era. This conversation will equip you with the unparalleled insights into the future of medicines and the strategic vision required to make it a reality. Welcome to the WATSNEX Podcast, the show that explores the intersection of innovation, market strategy, and operational excellence in high-stakes industries like life sciences. We bring you thought leadership content, sharing insights from visionary biopharma and medtech executives who are navigating inflection points like seeking funding, expanding outreach, or managing lean growth. I'm your host, Pascal Côté, founder and CEO of WATSNEX Biopharma. With over 25 years of hands-on project management and leadership across the entire life sciences value chain, from R&D and regulatory to tech transfer, manufacturing, and commercialization at companies like Pfizer, Merck, Novartis, and Medidata, I've witnessed firsthand the profound impact of technology and cutting-edge AI-driven commercial acceleration strategies. Today, we are incredibly fortunate to have Brad Thompson, Chairman, CEO, CTO of Wyvern Pharmaceuticals, joining us for an episode we're calling Disrupting Disease, Brad Thompson's Vision for Gene Correction in a New Healthcare Era. Brad is renowned for his pioneering work in gene therapy, his deep understanding of the biopharmaceutical landscape, and his strategic vision for how to bring truly transformative medical solutions to the world. Brad, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
To start, could you give our listeners a brief overview of your journey to your current role as Chairman, CEO, and CTO at Wyvern Pharmaceuticals? What initially drew you to the field of microbiology and immunology, and then specifically to the transformative potential of gene therapy? What's currently top of your mind for you and your team at Wyvern Pharmaceuticals?
I often get asked about why I got interested in genetic correction, genetic therapy. Really traces back to in the early 60s. There's an odd story, but Time Life put out a series of books about the origin of life and the origin of science. And in book 2 of that series, which my mom bought me in, I think, 1962 or 63, there was pictures of chromosomes. And genes had just been discovered, basically. So people were just starting to talk about that. And it occurred to me then, it's one of my earlier memories, that most disease is probably the result of errors in gene expression. And in 1974, I did my first gene transfer in the lab using technologies that were primitive compared to today's, but the outcomes were the same. We were able to actually transfer genes that weren't expressed in one organism to another. We did bacteria to bacteria, plant to plant, animal, and then human to human. And so I've known for a very long time that the technology would evolve and would have the base for us to do that. And over the years since then, there's been a lot of work, tens of thousands of PhDs work on this every year, finding the genetic basis for a large number of diseases. And that's where we are today, is that all that work by millions of person years worth of work, literally at this point, has got to this point where now we can take a look at pretty much any chronic disease and say, this is the result of misexpression of this gene or genes, because sometimes there's more than one, obviously. And we've had the technology for a long time to fix that. It just gets better and better. The technologies keep evolving. It's amazing. But the basic premise is there is that 80% of our healthcare dollars are spent on treating chronic illnesses. And there's not one of those that I can't tell you that the genetic basis is, and some of that's very recent, but you either up or down regulate genes to get them back to where they were before you had the illness, and you resolve the illness. And so it's quite a remarkable, I think, scientific journey for the whole community has led us to the state where there's people like me who have been working on this and thinking on this for a very long time, now have the ability and the tools and the support from industry and the support from the finance side to be able to realize that vision. The vision is to treat large disease areas at the cause, at the root, as you said.
You've articulated a truly ambitious vision, stating that correcting gene expression could address 90% of current healthcare spending. Can you elaborate on this, perhaps using examples like infectious diseases or chronic conditions like diabetes, and how Wyvern platform makes this possible?
Well, yeah, I mean, 80% of our healthcare spending is on chronic conditions, things like diabetes. And the other 20% is acute, but half of that acute is infectious disease. So if you're in a hospital, it's usually a bacterial infection. And if you're out of a hospital, it's usually a viral infection, oddly enough. There's most of the cases are split like that. And certainly in the infectious disease side, one of the good outcomes of the SARS-CoV-2 COVID-19 outbreak was people looking at the genetic differences that led to different outcomes. And what they found was that if you got first with SARS-CoV-2, and then they started looking at other viral infections, cytomegalovirus, influenza, and they kept going, is that if the more serious outcomes, death being the worst outcome, but chronic, illnesses like long COVID and things like that are due to a single mutation at a single innate immune response, a toll-like receptor. It's actually TLR3. And so patients that have mutated TLR3 are the ones that get for the large part, not 100%, are the ones that get those serious outcomes. And so you're faced with the prospect of, instead of trying to come back the infectious disease in this case, what you're trying to do is to take a look at the entire patient population and say, well, do I really care if you get a mild sniffle? No, as medically, that's no big deal, right? I do care if you progress and die. That's really the issue. And we can fix that to the large part just by correcting the expression of, in that case, one gene. So on the infectious disease side, it's pretty clear cut, and you have to do more than one gene with bacteria, but you can do all bacteria that way. So, you get a mild bacterial infection, your immune system just takes care of it normally. Why is there a small proportion of the patients go on and die, or in some cases, a large proportion die? You get the plague. I mean, it's a much higher death rate, but there's always survivors. And the question is, why are there survivors? Why didn't they die? And it's genetic. That's clearly the case. So that's the infectious disease side. I think we're moving ahead quite nicely on that. On the chronic side, I mean, diabetes is a very good example. Diabetes is an autoimmune disease. And what we see is that the symptoms that we've concentrated on for a century are just one of the symptoms of diabetes. We're looking at blood sugar regulation. And I mean, one of the organs that's affected in diabetes is your pancreas. It's not all the pancreas. It's the islet B cells, which are the ones that produce insulin. Oddly enough, it doesn't affect islet A cells, which are the ones that process proglucagon, which is the precursor of GLP-1 and GLP-2, but only in the intestine. In the pancreas, that proglucagon is processed into a glucagon, which is the balancing to insulin. So when there's too little sugar, you get more glucagon, and that is actually intact in diabetes patients. It's but it's very much an autoimmune disease. But we focused just on insulin and basically on blood sugar. But the causes of death from type 1 diabetes in particular are not due to that. We can modulate that. They're due to autoimmune reactions in other parts of your body, primarily cardiovascular and the vasculature in the eye. I mean, one of the most serious side effects of type 1 diabetes is T1D retinopathy. I mean, you go blind, right? And that's autoimmune. But we can fix any imbalance in your immune system, whether it's an innate or the active side, we can correct with gene vectors now. And Wyvern, we've done pretty much all of them. I mean, that's the exciting part, is that very few immune elements that you can name that we have not modulated with a gene vector at Wyvern. It's amazing. So, but you can go through that discussion on almost any chronic illness. Like literally, there's usually 1, 2, 3, usually not more than 3. Cancer's 4 different types of genes. And cancer is just an autoimmune disease when you really dig down underneath of it. It's the inability of your immune system to get rid of cancer. So you fix that, and then everything is fine. And every study that we had always had 1, 2, or 3 patients that were in that. Why did we cure them and the other ones didn't do anything? Same treatment, same therapy. And when you dig down, it's always the immune system, which is always interesting. And so, in that, again, that's another immune case. But there are chronic illnesses that are not immune, but we still know we know the genetic basis. But when you incorporate that all, you can imagine a future where a patient, in your future, like now almost, where a patient goes in, they're not feeling well. Instead of going to the doctor, they go down to the gene diagnostic expression clinic, and they take a blood sample or a punch biopsy and do a tissue sample and say, see ya. And 2 or 3 days later, they phone you up and go, you've got gene expressions in these 8 things, so you must have this disease. But, well, we've already made you an appointment with the gene correction lab. And, Thursday, go in and get your gene vectors to fix those 3 or 4 genes and see ya. That's medicine for 90% of medicine. I mean, that's like, whoa, that is transformative. That is going to change the way we deliver medicine in the world. So every patient would get access to the best quality of medicine at a fraction of the cost. I don't have any problem with that conversation. Obviously, a lot of people on the other side of the fence, i.e. the people who deliver healthcare the way we do it now, have a problem with that. But, they for the most part are actually pretty big about it and realize that the reason they went into healthcare was to help patients, not to make a living. So it's a whole community of people, not just me, that are moving towards that direction. We are going to transform healthcare. That no question about it.
That's a staggering potential impact. So in your experience, what is the single most critical operational bottleneck or challenge that leaders in gene therapy are facing today to bring such transformative solutions to market? Could you elaborate on its impact, perhaps with some metrics, timeframes, or financial implications?
Yeah, there's really 3 things. The first is that all of these technologies, depending on which variation, it all have basically a discovery based on what's selective and what's not selective process. There's a bottleneck there. And while it's infinitely better than it was when I first started doing these things, it's just this sheer mass of getting through things in a time frame that works possibly. I mean, the way I did gene therapy or gene delivery in the early 1970s, literally a team of 10 or 20 people would take 5 years because of all the screening and everything else to do what you and I could do in a week now. But that's still only 1% of the way to where we should be. That goes from 0 to 1, right? What we need to do is get to 1 to 100 so that we can get through these things in a hurry. And that's where, to me, I think the best application of AI that I can possibly imagine would be to take the limitations of 1, 10, 20 people and turn it into the ability to screen and go through. And once you start getting the structure function elements built into the AI, for them to come out with predictive target sequences for things to do what they're supposed to do that have very high degree of probability of working the first time you use it. And it's very exciting, honestly. The second issue is regulatory, honestly. We need to switch away from treating a specific disease and then having to rerun the same mode of action with the same disease. Like cancer is famous for this. I mean, you get an approval for a subset of head and neck cancers, and then you have to do another clinical study for a broader set of head and neck cancers, and then you need to do another clinical study to do ovarian, and then a different genotype of ovarian. I mean, it's endless. I mean, Keytruda has been going through Merck's been going through this with Keytruda for 25 years now, where they've just been broadening the label every other year, and their patents expire in 2 years. I mean, literally, it's taken them the whole patent life to even treat a fraction of cancers. Well, we need to get away from that from a regulatory point of view. If the mode of action works, that's what you'd be approving. You should be approving for something, in this case, downregulates PD-1, which would be the equivalent for Keytruda. And we could do that with a gene vector. I completely turn off PD-1 expression easily with a gene vector. So that's the second issue, is that we need to switch the regulatory environment from disease to target. And that's happening. To be fair, the FDA in particular is being very proactive about moving in that direction. And I have to compliment them endlessly, because they're doing a really good job at doing that. The third is access to capital, which is a very common refrain. These are not inexpensive studies to run under the way we do things now. I mean, if in gene therapy or gene correction, you can typically count on each patient costing you around $1 million to run in a clinical study. And there's very few ways you can, because you're monitoring safety endlessly, which you need to do, absolutely have to do, and. It just costs a lot. There's tens of thousands of data points per patient. It's just expensive to run these studies. And so, in our case, if I wanted to get a platform approval, so my approval of my platform to treat anything, you'd have to enroll probably 750 patients in the US and 750 patients in the EU. So that's 1,500 patients. That's $1.5 billion just primary costs just for the study. And then you have to have the company, the G&A up behind it. So you're probably looking at, for me to run that study, just my little company, 1.8 billion US. That's a good raise size in biotech, whether you're in Canada, the United States, or anywhere else. It's impossible in Canada, candidly. It's possible in the United States, and it's probably not possible in Europe. So, that's an issue. And you have a large number of companies that are starting to think that way, which is perfect. I love that. But we're all vying for the same pots and pools of money, right? And so access to capital is the third thing. And that's just, it's just the way it is in biotech. We're very good at spending money. That is our special skill. So,
Well, thank you. And you had mentioned during our previous conversation about that you had done 20,000 in-person institutional presentation. And so what did you learn during those numerous years and presentations in fine-tuning your financing and funding approach?
well, I was a NASDAQ CEO for 23 years in 2 different companies. We consciously decided to diversify our shareholder base jurisdictionally, geographically, as well as between retail and institutional. So we were aiming sort of between the 50 and 60% in institutional ownership, but also having it balanced between Europe, the United States, and Canada. We accomplished that. But basically, you have 3 shareholder bases and 2 very different types of shareholder bases, and the institutional versus retail. And my prime focus was on the institutional side. And so I was on the road 40 to 45 weeks of the year doing one-on-one meetings with institutional investors for 23 years. Yeah. So that's how you get to that number. Basically, you're building demand for your next financing. It's the way I look at it. And I mean, as a CEO of a publicly traded biotech company, your job is to raise money. That is your prime responsibility. But it's also to make sure that whatever value you're building is expressed in the stock market appropriately too, because you owe that to your investors. I mean, when you take people's money, you owe them the duty of care to make their money be worth more than what they gave you. That's just the basis of it. If I take people's money, I only take it if I think I can make them money. I'd rather go out of business than take people's money and not make them money. What's important to an institutional investor? What's important is that they get a return that fits in with their projected returns on whatever fund they're with, which are all different. They all have different expectations on returns, and fits in with their time frame for that expectation. And they all have different senses of that. So you need to find out for each investor what their expectations are. And not just what they say their expectations are, but what really their expectations are. And once you know that, then you can present in a way that gives them that information. And that allows them to make the decision or not. So let's say you were doing an hour presentation, which is unusual. You very rarely talk for an hour. But let's say you had an hour. I mean, you might spend 7, 8, 9 minutes on your tech, maybe. And the rest of the time is spent on what are the milestones, when are you going to meet those milestones, which gives you the time frame, because the milestones are what changes the value until you're profitable. And most biotech companies are not profitable. So you have to know what changes the value of your company. That's real milestones, not like real milestones. And there's actually not that many milestones that actually really change the value of a company. And most of them are clinical data. And so when are you going to meet those milestones? What are those milestones? And what's the time frame on that? And then you can just see people going through the calculation back about whether, they give you 10 or 50 or $100 million, whether they're going to meet their time frame on that. So you spend all your time talking about how they're going to make money, basically. And very early on in the conversation, they're evaluating you about whether you believe that your product works or not. And a disturbingly large percentage of biotech CEOs, when they present to people, do not convey their belief that their stuff works, which means we're all slightly mad because, basically you're suspending belief. You're asking somebody to believe, usually a very intelligent, very qualified person, almost inevitably, to believe in something that there's no objective evidence to support their belief, and then convey that to somebody who wants to write you a multi-million-dollar check. Basically, that's what you're talking about. But you could tell in the first couple of minutes about whether a CEO believes in what they're doing or not, and not the hype part, but the belief part. Do they believe it? And that's often a good chunk of the decision process on the other side of the table. Is if you believe it, and they respect you, and you've got a good track record, then they're going to invest in you.
Thank you. I'd like to switch slightly subject about accelerating innovation and your strategic approaches in the future role of AI. So it is clear that the challenges in bringing gene therapy to a global scale are significant. So let's talk about how you approach solving these. You've emphasized the importance of process compression and technology. Where do you see the biggest opportunities for accelerating the scientific and operational aspects of your work? And if you may share the example of the work you had done with your daughter that took you 15 months, and as an example, that would be great.
There's obviously a large number of things you can apply AI to, but going through large data sets to find things that you don't know what you're looking for is really a critical thing. A lot of people think that AI is just a big sort program, if you want to think of it that way, and in some forms of it are. That's what it does very well. But the ones that we're using as tools in research go beyond that. They actually find trends. They find things that you don't know. The data's there. They just have to find it. But they have to find it. And the example that you just brought up that we talked about before, when we'd run a head and neck study in 19 countries, it was phase 3. And the data at the first interim analysis just didn't make sense. Like I looked at the curves and I thought there's something unexplained in there. It just didn't make sense. And so my daughter and I spent 15 months picking through all that data. There was like 3 million data points that we had to pick through. We didn't know what we were looking for. And we found it though. And what we found was that if you had grade 1 or higher fever when you were administered our product, which is a virus, it was a gene vector, it's a virus, right? If you had grade 1 fever or higher, that was absolutely predictive of extension in lifespan. So the patients who didn't get fever didn't get any benefit. Patients who had fever at any one of the administration points, and some of them were getting treated 25, 30 times, you saw grade 1 fever or higher in just one of those instances, then there was a statistically significant improvement in lifespan as opposed to people who didn't have fever. And because I'm also nutty about collecting data I may not necessarily need, but eventually believe I will need, we did actually had collected the data, and we found a very specific cause of that fever, and that led you to an autoimmune defect. Back to my autoimmune thing, it was one of the innate immune system markers. And in a follow-up study that we ran, we actually were screening for that and got insanely high complete response rates in late-stage cancer patients. So, but yes, that took, that would have been a 10-minute job with the AI, with time for coffee for the AI in the middle of the 10 minutes, literally. I mean, 3 million data points is a joke to an AI. That's like, what, you're boring me, right? You can just hear the AI going, oh God, these people. But, finding that, in hindsight, it should have been obvious, but you had to pick through all that data to see it. We didn't know what we were looking for. We didn't know if we were looking for fever or a blood chemistry marker or changes in blood pressure. We had no idea, right? We had no idea. So you had to pick through it all. On the colorectal study, it was very strange because, again, the curves just didn't make sense. You knew there was a confounding error. And so I stratified for gender, which wasn't in the protocol, but I wasn't planning on trying to announce we cured colorectal cancer. I was just going to rerun the study if I found something, which is what you should do when you're basically doing data analysis, backtracking retrospectively. And what we found was that in the men, there was absolutely no lifespan benefit at all between men getting our product and men not getting our product, just getting the standard of care. Nothing. It's like complete waste of time to treat the men. Women, we got a statistically significant increase in lifespan. And it was like 3 times the lifespan. I mean, unbelievable. And of course, the doctors fought us, and I just wanted to rerun the study. But again, an AI would have punched that number out at me in like minutes. And it took a long time to pick through that data too. So, I mean, there's the real life, just big backtrack on those things is I mean, the data sets have shown that. Everybody I know in the business has had a clinical study where you look at the curves and they don't make sense. It's not that they don't work or they work. It's somewhere in between. The curves cross or they get closer and then they spread apart again, or like things that just, there's a confounding factor and you don't know what it is. That's a perfect thing for not a very sophisticated AI to do. You want to get slightly more sophisticated? I mean, you look at what I'm doing now. When you're upregulating a gene, there's really no room for an AI on that. Basically, you're saying, I need to make more of protein X. And I look up the protein sequence on Uniprot or something like that, convert that to a gene sequence, drop it into a gene vector. And most of the time, first time you try it, you're actually improving expression of that thing. It's that simple. Like it's a 15-minute job for a human to do. Why would you involve an AI in that? The other direction, which is downregulating, you're using siRNA expressing constructs or mRNA expressing contrasts. So they're looking, sort of like 18 to 21 nucleotide lengths. And there the binding varies and the specificity varies. And I mean, you take 2 to the 21st and there's a lot of sequence possibilities there. I mean, it's ridiculous, right? So having a sophisticated AI that also looks at the because these things fold up on each other and they have conformations and they have things that's sticking out. And you also have the target has a folding conformation that's sticking out. So it's not just the chemistry, it's also the physical shape. I mean, that is the perfect place for an AI because you're talking about millions of choices per target easily. And to screen all that is just like, it's impossible. It's just impossible to come up with the best target, where an AI could give you a very good idea. It could give you probably half a dozen candidates that all had high binding, and you just pick the best one, and that was the most specific. And that's a 2 weeks screening job. And that's, to me, the big hits in AI. So I'm pretty excited that this is actually possible now. I mean, we've all been hoping that we'd have AI tools for a very long time, and here they are. So let's use it.
Yeah, and shared that you were anticipating for that specific application, 99% time reduction and 95% cost reduction. This is quite impactful in your area.
It's unbelievable. I mean, people are always talking about trying to attract R&D to their jurisdiction. Usually that's what it is. It's usually a government wanting to get people to do their research and development. So the lab work and the clinical work in one place. But when you look at in a real company that's selling product, the scale of activity associated with making and selling, or making, marketing, and selling a product is orders of magnitude higher than the activity doing the R&D. But the time element is all staggered on that little tiny percentage of cost. It's crazy. I mean, and you can't just add people to make the time get shorter. That's not the way it works. AI can make it work shorter. And that's incredible. I mean, we talk about wasting patent time doing R&D, and we all do. You can eat up half a patent's life doing the R&D. And the other half, you're doing the important part, which is making and selling the product under that patent. But every day of patent life is worth a lot at the end with a mature product. And so to compress that time and save years of patent exclusivity just by applying a single tool it's unbelievable what that means. I mean, we spend probably 15% of gross sales on salaries. So if you have a $100 billion product, I mean, you're spending $15 billion a year on salaries for how many years? To do the R&D on that product is $1 billion. If you hit it right, I mean, the higher number that you hear is always incorporates all the failures. You have to amortize the failures. But if you look at it on a successful product basis, $1 billion will do it. That's 4 weeks worth of sales. When you reduce it down to the whatever, and it's even less than that when you look at the percentage of sales that go to salary. And so being able to compress the time frame on that upfront part, wow, it's just unbelievable the effect that it'll have on the profitability and the duration of sales on branded pharmaceuticals. It's going to completely transform the return on investment profiles for all these products. It's just with that application of one thing, AI. It's just like, why wouldn't people be even more excited than they are? A lot of people are excited, but everybody should. They have no idea when you do it by numbers what you're going to save, how much more money you're going to make. Everybody should be piling onto that. And I mean, most boards of directors are full of people my age who still have trouble sending emails. So
What would you say if we talk about the urgency factors? What would be the consequences of delaying the adoption of such advanced tools such as AI?
well, the people who adopt it are going to dominate the market. The people who don't adopt it are going to be out of business. And that's just the precept of capitalism. And you can go back, whatever example, the introduction of railroads. What did that do to horse-drawn transport of things, or the adoption of air freight, or the adoption of internet? I mean, look at the Swedish mail service, whatever it's not Canada Post, obviously, or US Postal Service, USPS, but it's whatever the Swedes call it. I mean, if you need something delivered like now, you go down to the little office, they scan it, they just send it electronically to the office nearest to the whatever, they print it off, they certify that it's a true copy of the original, and they walk it down the street. You can literally get mail from point A to point B anywhere in Sweden in less than an hour. And of course, they dominate. The couriers don't even bother there. They just, because how you supposed to, and it's like $6 or something like that. You can't compete with that. So they adopt fast. But I mean, can you imagine the effect on the mail couriers in Canada if Canada Post adopted that mindset? They'd be all out of business tomorrow, literally. But that's what's going to happen in pharmaceuticals, is that the people that adopt that mindset for new pharmaceuticals to compress that time frame they're going to be the ones that own the market, because they'll, when you have a branded product that's being sold for 15 years instead of 8, as that branded, with you having market exclusivity, even when your patents run out, sorry, I mean, we still buy Bayer aspirin at 3 times the price of generic aspirin, and their patents ran out a century ago. I mean, literally branding matters, and people, that association with a quality product that has a name on it matters. And when you add in that extra years, other than the extra years you get, which are valuable enough of themselves, but once you lose that IP, that's when you really start to see that extra time frame come into play. It's really quite remarkable.
You had decades of experience navigating the complexities of drug development and regulatory environments. What common mistakes do organizations make when they try to implement new complex technologies, and how can our listeners avoid them to ensure a smoother, effective adoption process?
Yeah, well, there's an expression that's used in a bunch of industries. First is worst. And it's because of that, usually it's regulatory adoption on a new technology. And people just get, like, we were running half a dozen clinical studies with the first gene vector that I ever did in the clinic. And then that Will Smith movie came out. I can't even remember its name, where the Emma Thompson character had come up with a cure for cancer with a gene vector, and they cured everybody. And then a week later, the zombie plague took over the planet, right? Try enrolling patients into a clinical study after that happens. It was difficult. And try convincing the FDA that you weren't going to turn the entire population into a zombie. Like, really? That's what you do safety studies for. And it doesn't matter whether it's gene vectors or antisense, or whether you go back, antibodies face the same thing. I mean, and I'm sure a lot of the small chemical entities face the same thing. That was just before my time. So when you're first through with an exciting new technology, you always run into regulatory resistance based on the unknown. And one has to be really respectful of the FDA in this, because they're the only regulatory agency in the world where if they make a mistake today, on March 18th, 2026, that if something bad goes wrong in 2032, those people will all be sitting in front of a congressional committee on full TV talking about why they made that decision at 11 o'clock 6 years ago or 8 years ago. I mean, really, that kind of back exposure really changes your outlook. And I have more sympathy than anybody will ever know for those people, because it's a tough, tough job. They have to be cautious. To me, the biggest thing to focus on is safety, because if a product works or it doesn't work, that's life. I mean, that's what we all face when we stick it into a human, is it may not work. But you just be over the top about your focus on safety in your preclinical work, and try to bias your understanding by collecting way too much data. Just keep doing it in the clinic as well. And if you go into a regulatory agency with that attitude, and they see that attitude, they will work with you. And they literally will work with you, because they know that your concerns are the same as theirs. And I mean, it's a company killer to have a product kill people. I mean, from just a practical perspective, they have to worry about sitting in front of a congressional committee. You have to worry about your company dying. I mean, small biotech companies don't have the luxury of having 10 products that are already for sale, and the 11th kills a couple of people, and you go, okay, well, we're not going to work in that area. Usually you have 1 or 2 or 3 products, and you don't have the luxury of that. You have a death or 2 on study, and all of a sudden, that's it. And so that's the focus. If you go into a regulatory agency in healthcare anyway, and just be safety, 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 safety the first time you talk to them, and mean it, and walk your talk. And if they ask you to do extra safety studies, you just say, yes, yes, ma'am, or yes, sir, whatever is appropriate. And you do it, because that's the best thing, and exceed what they want you to do always in that area. Then you have a pretty good pathway. I mean, look at all the stuff now, people going backtracking 50 years and looking at vaccine data sets. I mean, all because one guy made up some fake stats because he hated vaccine and said there was a link with autism. That's what it's all, the root of it is. One ill-meaning person has caused all this stuff with vaccines, concern about vaccines. But it's no big deal going back and looking at the data sets. We have the data sets. It's arduous. I mean, looking at 60,000 patients' data, the data's there. So we can do it, right? No big deal. We can go back and look at the data and just do it objectively, and just do it and just show that they're safe. And that's, all the big companies, that's exactly what they're doing. They're not being very verbal about it because they're just doing it. Good for them.
Thank you, Brad. This has been an incredibly insightful and actionable conversation. To recap some of the profound points we've uncovered today, we've explored your journey and Wyvern's transformative vision for healthcare through gene correction, aiming to address 90% of current medical spending. We delve into how strategic approaches, including the future role of AI, will accelerate R&D, particularly for tasks like sRNA, mRNA screening, and massive clinical data management, highlighting how advanced technology is not just cheaper and faster, but fundamentally better. And we discuss practical steps for preparing for this transformation and your unique philosophy for success in high-stakes biotech ventures, all contributing to disrupting disease, Brad Thompson's vision for gene correction in a new healthcare era. For me, the most powerful takeaway in your unwavering commitment to delivering on the promise of gene therapy, backed by a strategic understanding of both the science and the business, and your clear vision for how advanced technology will be indispensable in that journey. Brad, for our listeners who want to learn more about your groundbreaking work at Wyvern Pharmaceuticals or connect with you, where's the best place for them to find you?
Best place, the easiest place would be to either look me up on LinkedIn. I hate to say, I can't talk. I still can't believe I say that out loud, but LinkedIn, because it's easy. It's easy, right? Just Google Brad Thompson Wyvern, and or the LinkedIn thing, Brad Thompson at Wyvern, you'll get me instantly, right? Or just go to our info at email that's on our wyvernpharma.com site. So either of those, and we pay attention to both those. We look at those every day. So that's, it's not one of those ones that goes into the dead mailbox.
Fantastic. So we'll have all those links in our show notes. And for those interested in exploring how AI solutions can drive efficiency and accelerate growth in their own biopharma ventures, you can find more information about what's next biopharma and how we help visionary biopharma and medtech executives achieve ambitious objectives and overcome critical pains through AI-driven solutions at what'snextbiopharma.com. If you found this episode valuable, please subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Your support helps us bring more incredible stories and insights to you. Brad, thank you again for sharing your expertise, your passion, and your remarkable insights with us today. It's been an absolute privilege.
Well, thank you for giving me the time to do my thing.
To our listeners, thank you for joining us on the What's Next podcast. Until next time, keep innovating, keep questioning, and remember that the future of growth is being built by those who embrace what's next. Stay curious. Thank you.